Today on Unity Motorsports Garage, we're going to talk about the 351 Cleveland and how it's the most overlooked boss in Ford's boss lineup. We're going to talk about the humble beginnings on the production line to the NASCAR oval tracks and total domination and ultimate domination on the drag strips of the NHRA. In order to do this, we've got to go back and talk about some history, but this will give an idea of the men and the things that had to be done to make this engine dominate. By the middle 1960s, the muscle car wars were in full swing, with each brand trying to outdo each other on the street. The big blocks reigned supreme of the day. The only problem with this was, with the big blocks ruling the streets, insurance companies took notice of this and began to put surcharges on those particular engines. By the late 60s, Chevrolet and Mopar had developed mid-size engines to help get underneath this insurance surcharge. With Chevrolet having a 350 cubic inch engine and Mopar having a 340 cubic inch engine, this made these cars serious performers in the right chassis. That left Ford in the cold.
A 390 cubic inch V8, new wide oval tires, and an optional speed control that lets you set your own course of action. Norman discovered a new wave of excitement.
It didn't take Ford owners long to realize that they were behind, as the Mustang can be had with a 302 or a 390 cubic inch engine. This led to the 351 Windsor. The Windsor was pretty much a stopgap engine that was developed off of the 302-289 architecture to fill the void. Even though this engine was rated at 290 horsepower, it was lacking in the performance department, which led Ford engineers to come up with a new 351. This one was going to be a powerhouse. The Cleveland was the engine for the 70s. Ford decided to spend over $100 million investing in this new engine for the 1970s. Ford referred to this engine as the 335 series, and as you can tell, it looks completely different from its Windsor brother, sharing few similarities like bore centers of 4.38 inches. The cam is actually raised in the Cleveland block, and it has wider oil pan rails, which allows for more stroke. The 1971 Boss engine would come equipped with 4-bolt mains, where the standard Cleveland has 2-bolt. The biggest difference being in the cylinder head design itself. The 4V Cleveland had massive intake valves, canted, which made for big power. It even was offered in a 2V version, which had smaller valves and still made 250 horsepower. The ironic part is, even though in the 4V configuration it was rated from Ford at 300 horsepower, only 10 horsepower more than the Windsor brother, but the performance on the track was completely different. By 1971, the Mustang had grew to huge proportions. Even though the muscle car era was coming to an end, no one apparently told Ford about this, as they started out to create the Boss 351. This would be the final chapter in the Boss series. This engine being fitted with a high-lift, solid flat tappet camshaft, 11-to-1 compression, and 4-bolt mains. This engine was rated at 330 horsepower and was a true performer. This car could run with the best numbers ever produced in the muscle car era, going out with a bang. It didn't take the NASCAR boys long to figure out that this was the engine to run. With the big blocks being gone in '74, guys like Bud Moore and the Wood Brothers was going to show what this engine could actually do. Here you can actually see a really young Darrell Waltrip in his rookie year. Let's take a look back at the Wood Brothers and show how awesome this engine is.
It is still David Pearson leading Richard Petty, and they're in the final 2 laps of the race. This is unbelievable to see these cars this close, particularly these two men, because the crowd must be on their toes at this time to see Pearson and Petty going this way. What can possibly happen in this very last lap that's just coming up? Not to mention the third and fourth battle.
Right, coming down out of turn number 4, coming down past the start-finish line. And Pearson backs off for Petty. Something wrong with Pearson. Petty takes the lead. I think Pearson backed off of it.
It looks almost as he ran out of petrol or something. I've never seen anything like this happen before. It could be very bad luck for him, but my goodness, what an advantage. Richard Petty. The crowd are absolutely on their feet and yelling. Richard Petty's got an enormous advantage. 300 or 400 yards, it looks like, on that back straightaway down there at almost 200 miles an hour. And there is David Pearson falling back on this very last lap of this fantastic race, but he seems to be closing up, Keith.
To have stopped so suddenly, to have suddenly slowed up like that, makes me think, though, Jackie, he backed off on purpose because obviously he's still got horsepower, and he's now closed it right in behind Richard Petty as they turn and come for home. Can Pearson slingshot him as he comes down low? Petty may run him into the fence, and it's going to be Pearson winning it. An incredible, daring move, and it paid off for David Pearson. Official finishing order. David Pearson first, Richard Petty second, Buddy Baker, Cale Yarborough dead heat for third, Bobby Allison fifth. David Pearson headed for victory lane, and let's go back to the finish and have another look at one of the greatest finishes I've ever seen. As they turned down off turn 4, it became obvious David Pearson had the edge in horsepower. The question was, could Richard Petty hold him off? And right here we got our answer, as Pearson literally came to the very edge of the racetrack to slingshot Richard Petty and take the victory by the margin of 1 car lead. Now let's go down to victory lane.
Well, you're a crotchety old grandpa, David. I'll tell you, that finish was something else.
Well, Chris, I knew that if I let him stay behind me, that he would draft me and beat me, so I just backed off right there at the last flag, the white flag, and let him go on by, then I got him back, coming off 4.
You know, David, I've never seen a driver so in control of the situation as you were. Didn't you have any doubts at all that you'd win?
Well, oh, yeah, I was all the time. I really didn't know for sure where I could get him back or not. In fact, I like to slow it up a little too much when I let him go by me.
Well, if Richard had done that to you, would you feel a little insulted?
Well, if he'd done that to me, I'd have backed off and stayed right behind him.
Richard, what a finish. What exactly happened?
Well, we got to the start-finish line in the last lap, and he let off on it and let me get about 300 yards ahead, and he had enough horsepower that even going down the backstretch, he had to sort of feather out of it to keep it passing me going in the corner over there so that he could make a spectacular coming off the corner, and that's just how simple it is.
Now, when he came off the power, what did you think? Do you think that something had gone wrong? What was your immediate reaction?
When I was right behind him and being he went off all the way, if he'd have feathered out of it, then I would have, figured what he was doing. But when he went all the way off on it, then it kind of scared me because I like to run over him. I wasn't expecting him to run off on it, and it was really a dangerous move from that standpoint.
So you really did get a big surprise.
Yeah, really. I had to jerk the car around, and I got a little bit out of shape, really, to jerk it around and miss him. And it was just one of them things that I think that is awful obvious for him to do something like that, just to show how much faster he was than the rest of us.
This dominance continued into the 1980s with Bill Elliott and his brother Ernie using derivatives of the Cleveland. He just showed how dominant this combination is at the 1985 Winston 500 at Talladega. Let's take a look.
I don't ever recall in the modern era anybody that had a more or a bigger speed advantage at a place like Talladega than on that given day.
There was no doubt that Bill Elliott was going to win.
And he is in a zip code of his own, which is where he was so many times during that entire season.
They were beating people on super speedways week in and week out. The competitors were all scratching their heads.
They were unbeatable. I mean, literally, I've never seen anything like it.
And this is how much of an advantage they had over the fields, and you'll never see this again, never.
He gets down 2 laps. 1 lap at Talladega is 2.66 miles. He ran Cale Yarborough down over 5 miles.
Do you realize how much faster he was than all the rest of the cars?
Maybe the fastest race car I've ever seen.
I just want to make sure everybody understands. He ran them down, passed everyone, ran them down again, passed everyone, ran them down again.
He made up 5 miles.
And them rascals made 2 laps up under green.
Under green.
under green.
That's like you're out there on 8 cylinders and everybody else is on 4.
They had no competition on this day.
That's getting it done.
And they got 2 laps down and just flat ran them down. Should put in perspective how strong that engine was.
And quite frankly, it was probably the biggest waxing that we have ever seen in this sport, period, bar none. That race, 1985, Bill Elliott wins Talladega.
By the late 1980s, Cleveland NASCAR blocks were getting scarce. Ford, recognizing this, decided to develop the SVO R block, which was Windsor-based but put the Cleveland attributes into it by using smaller main journals. NASCAR, trying to get a handle on this cylinder head situation, enlisted none other than Robert Yates to come up with the C3 head. This was to standardize all of the Ford teams so that they would be running the same unit. While the head evolved through the C3 to the D3, this engine would in fact remain in place until it was finally retired by the FR9. Let's take a look at some drag racing history from here on out. The year was 1971. The NHRA Pro Stock rules were going to be changing for the 72 season, allowing smaller cubic inch engines. This left Ford drag racers in a scramble trying to develop the 351 into a drag racing engine. With Bill Jenkins debuting his 1972 Vega with a small block at the Winter Nationals, it was catch up for the Ford teams, as Jenkins ran away with the entire season in 1972. By the end of the 72 season, things were starting to look up for the Ford teams. With Ken Dondero driving Dyno Don Nicholson's Pinto, he took the runner-up position at the World Finals. The Ford racers found additional power over the winter of that year with the development of the high port plates by Gapp and Roush and Budmore Engineering. This gave the Ford drag racers a distinct advantage as it put them in the winner circle. Sam Auxier Jr. told me in a conversation that he had never seen an engine respond to modifications like the 351 Cleveland. Initially, they start out with small 660 center squirter carburetors. They found out that they loved Dominators, and he also found out that they cannot get enough camshaft. This took the Cleveland to a new level of horsepower. The 73 season started off with Dyno Don winning the Winter Nationals and the Gator Nationals. The U.S. Nationals was won by the upcoming Bob Glidden, and then the year was finished off with Gapp and Roush taking 2 wins at the end of the season. Things had changed for Ford, so let's check it out.
Now let's move to Pro Stock and round 1. First matchup, Bob Glidden of Greenwood, Indiana in the 73 Pinto against Wayne Gapp of Birmingham, Michigan. He'll be in the left lane in the 73 Pinto.
Pro Stock of Ted is the battle of the super hot cars, similar to what you see on the street. These are, in this case, Gapp and Roush bringing their 74 Mustang to this event. In the right-hand lane, the man that won the Pro Stock title at the Nationals a year ago at Indianapolis Raceway Park, Bob Glidden in the Pinto. These cars are powered by engines using only gasoline. Here's the world champion Wayne Gapp. Using only gasoline, they are limited to 2 4-barrel carburetors and considerable chassis modifications to allow them to run elapsed times in the high 8s and low 9s, speeds over 150.
An extremely close race, Bob Glidden.
And now for the Pro Stock final. Richie Zuhl's Camaro, Wayne Gapp's 4-door Maverick, going for top honors in this category. The burnout, cleaning off the rear tires, heating him up to the proper racing temperature. Zuhl, a 28-year-old driver from Lindenhurst, Long Island, says in the New York City area he has to park his car in front of his house. Gapp's 4-door car has been very successful in this kind of racing. It's from Livonia, Michigan, the Auto Home. Now on the line and ready to go.
Gapp's 6th major triumph.
And this is the car, Don, you hope will carry you to a world championship here in 77.
Yeah, we sure hope so, Steve. We've been going all the way with it this year, and we plan on being there at the end.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you. We take all the luck we can get.
David, back to you.
Dyno Don proved that you do get better with age, as in round number 2 racing in Pro Stock Eliminator, he established a new national record of 8.57 seconds elapsed time with his Ford Mustang. That's 8.57 seconds from a standing start to cover a quarter of a mile distance. Plenty quick for Dyno Don. In the finals of Pro Stock Eliminator, 50-year-old Dyno Don Nicholson wheels the Ford Mustang 2. His competition from Totowa, New Jersey, Frank Iaconio, the classic Ford versus Chevrolet battle, the Monza of Iaconio, the Mustang of Nicholson. Dyno Don Nicholson in a close race, 8.78 seconds, 153 miles an hour.
In Pro Stock, it'll be Bob Glidden against Frank Iaconio.
If you can't match Glidden's elapsed time, there's only one other thing you can do, right?
Yeah, just hope that he fouls.
Or you leave on him.
Well, yeah, but it's going to be an awful lot.
Bob Glidden, there's just one real tough customer from New Jersey named Frank Iaconio standing between you and your 5th consecutive Pro Stock world title.
He is a tough customer. He's run very good here. Of course, the track has affected him like it's affected us, and we have run better than him. We're just going to give it our best. Hope everything comes out the way we want it.
The Pro Stock World Championship comes down to the last race on the last day between the number 2 car of Frank Iaconio and the number 1 car of Bob Glidden. They're staging, they're ready, they're away. Glidden gets the whole shot. It's Glidden pulling Iaconio, and Glidden all the way to the finish. He is the world champion once again. Bob Glidden out in front right from the start.
And he saved the best for last, 8.42 seconds, 159 miles an hour, top speed at low elapsed time.
An incredible run by Bob Glidden on the far side. Look how fast he jumps off. Let's go down to the shutdown area and Steve Evans.
You're looking at one of the happiest faces I think any drag racer has ever worn. Bob Glidden, congratulations. Your 5th Pro Stock world title in a row, and you know what? You just became the winningest drag racer in history.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy. I feel really bad for the boys from Texas. They've done such a great job, but Ed and ourselves and the kids will be so happy. It's such a great win for us, Steve. I just can't even tell you.
And also rather wealthy, about a $40,000 day for the Gliddens.
I'll tell you, it's more than the money right now, though.
So Bob Glidden has done it once again. There's his wife, Etta. She is so happy. She's crying. Congratulations to Bob Glidden, the world champion once again. And here he drives his machine back to receive the accolades of the crowd on his way back to the starting line. Congratulations to our funny car champion, Ron Colson, and of course to the new world champion in Pro Stock, Bob Glidden. I'm Paul Page. For Steve Evans, so long.
When you think about what Glidden and all of the others were able to accomplish with the Cleveland platform is nothing short of amazing, considering that the rule changes that were put in place to keep the Cleveland from winning. I guess it really does show that Ford saved the best boss for last. If you want to find out more about Cleveland's and the Boss 351, check out my buddy Tim Halstead's YouTube channel, Drag Boss Garage. And if you like this video, check out my other history videos on the Boss 429 and the Boss 302. Until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later.